Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Go So Beautiful. My name's Becky and it's sew time. Today I have a sew along. I am going to make the Oakley vest from Love Notions out of some faux fur. My inspiration for making this vest came from a little sample vest I saw sewn up at Hobby Lobby, and I'll show you the picture here. It is a child's vest, but I saw it and I thought this would be a great accessory to have in my wardrobe. Take any outfit up just a notch. Would be very stylish. So I purchased some faux fur. It happened to be on sale, and if you're interested in seeing how to sew with faux fur and make this vest, stay tuned. All right, let's get started. I'm going to tell you what supplies you need, and then I'll show you how to cut it out and some tips for sewing with faux fur. The first thing you need, obviously, is the pattern. This Oakley vest comes from lovenotions.com, and it is a PDF which you can download and print out at home and tape the pattern pieces together or have it printed. I've already printed mine, and I went ahead and traced off the pieces I need for my vest according to my size. Now, the Oakley vest comes in 3 different versions, and there is a faux fur version. However, you'll notice in my inspiration piece that it has a collar and a zipper. So I am going to make this view with the collar and the zipper, and I'm going to omit the binding and line it. And I will be showing you how to do that. To make the vest, you're going to need some lining, and this is just acetate lining. I have purchased this faux fur from Hobby Lobby. I have about a yard, and it's 60 inches wide, so that should be plenty. But you can read the pattern and decide exactly how much you need. Okay, so I mentioned you would need your faux fur, lining, the pattern. I forgot to mention you will also need a separating zipper. I purchased this zipper from Joann's, but you can order them from Walwack. They have a great selection of any length zipper you could possibly want. So to better understand how to use faux fur, I watched a video from Melly Sews, and I will link that video in the card so that you can watch it yourself. She has some great tips for sewing with faux fur, minky, anything with a nap. So let's talk about that. If you buy any kind of faux fur, you will notice that when you rub it one way, it will feel nice and smooth, and when you rub it the other way, it may feel differently, and the color will kind of change, and that's because it has a nap. This particular fur feels the same both ways, so I really don't have to worry about that. But if you do pick a faux fur that has a nap, you're going to want to make sure that you lay all your pieces in the same direction of the nap. In other words, if you want it to be smooth going down, then you want to make sure all of your pieces are laying so that the nap is down, and vice versa if you want it to go up. The other thing she talked about was, in addition to having a nap, the fibers on the faux fur that stick up is called a pile. So when you lay them together, it's really thick. So what Melly advises when you're cutting things out is that you cut them out one layer in one layer. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. This is my selvage, and my first piece is the front, and to cut out the front you need to, this is the grain line. I'm actually going to cut it out this way because I need two fronts. So I'm going to use my pattern weights and rather than cutting around the pattern piece, I'm going to trace around it. And you can use a washable marker or any kind of chalk. You just want to use something that's not going to bleed through to the other side. Okay, so I'm going to trace around my pattern. And these Love Notion patterns only have a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to add a little bit extra just to make sure. I want to have at least a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to trace a little bit beyond my pattern piece. That actually looks like quite a bit. And I am using a Crayola crayon washable marker. You can use any marker you want as long as it's washable. Now there are two sides to the front, so I need mirror images. I'm going to mark, this is the spot. This also has pockets. I'm just going to take my pattern piece and flip it over, pull this down, and flip it over to cut out the other side. Okay, I'm going to go ahead now and cut out my two pieces, and I am going to use a rotary cutter. You can use regular shears, but you want to be careful. This type of fabric will dull your scissors up very quickly. So you may need to take them and get them sharpened afterwards. So you want something that's really sharp. And because I'm left-handed, I can't see very well with this rotary cutter. I'm going to get my other one. Now for the back is cut on the fold. So I'm going to turn my fabric around my fur and cut it from the opposite selvage. And I'm going to do the same thing basically, except I'm not going to cut down the middle. So here is my back piece. Going to put some weights, and you can use anything for weights. You don't have to have, I just made these for fun. I got the idea from Joy Bernhardt, is that her name? I'll post a link in the description box. Now I'm going to cut out the lining. Now I'm going to cut out the collar, and I'm just going to do the same thing I did for the front and the back. I'm going to trace it, flip it over, and cut it out. I'm sorry, the collar calls for 2 pieces, so I want to cut one of the fur and one of the lining. Here is my collar piece. This is the fold line. And again, I'm just going to draw around this, adding a little extra seam allowance. Okay, I'll be back in a minute. We're almost ready to sew, but I forgot to mention that you need to cut out pockets if you want pockets in your vest. I am going to put pockets in my vest, and you need to use the pocket pattern piece for the faux fur version of the vest. And just cut out 2 for each pocket for a total of 4 out of the lining. You don't have to put pockets in. You can omit that if you want, but if you want them, you need to cut them out. Okay, let's get started. So the first step for this is to sew the pockets on. And according to the tutorial from Melly Sews, She recommends using a large needle, and I've got a 90-14 put on here. And also she recommends using a walking foot. Now, some sewing machines come equipped with a walking foot, and others you have to buy them separately, but they are so worth it because it makes putting bulky fabrics together so much easier. The other thing she recommends is using clips to put your pieces together instead of pins. You can use pins, but the fabric tends to shift very easily when you're sewing with it. So I'm going to use clips. So one tip that Melly from Melly Sews gave in terms of sewing with faux fur is to trim down the fur at the side seams to reduce some of the bulk. And so I have just trimmed down some of the fur on this seam, hoping that this will help with sewing this pocket on. It's very slippery, and that's a big problem too. I think maybe if you used a cotton woven instead of the silky stuff, it might be easier, but you know, I've already committed to using this, so I'm going to start kind of in the middle of my seam and go backwards. And there's our pocket sewn to the side seam. So now I'm going to do the others. Okay, now that I have stitched the pockets on, I'm going to stitch the zipper to the front, center front. I also used my overlocker and overlocked all of the edges. It seems like that helps give the machine something to grab onto. If you don't have an overlocker, I would really try to trim down some of this pile at the edge of the seam. I think that will help with sewing the seams up. This particular fabric really tends to curl a lot too, so I think the overlocker helps with that. I'm not sure if a zigzag would help or not. So I've got this separating sport zipper I purchased from Joann, and it is 22 inches, which should fit from the top to the bottom of the front. And I'm going to clip it on, and I'm going to put it with the right side of the zipper tape to the right side of the fabric. And I want the top of my zipper pull right just inside the seam allowance of the neckline. This one looks like it might be a little bit long, but hopefully it'll be okay. All right, So my zipper head is just about a 1/2 inch down from the seam allowance. So now I'm going to baste this on with my sewing machine. Since I'm sewing this zipper tape on, I've changed from my walking foot to my zipper foot, and I'm going to sew as close to the teeth as possible. And I moved the zipper pull down so that it doesn't create so much bulk, and I'm going to sew this down and then I'll move it back up. And again, this fur is very tricky to sew with. Just go nice and slow. Leave your needle down, and then carefully work that zipper pull back up to the top and continue on. Front piece. Okay, now I'm going to go and clip the other side of the front to the other side of the zipper tape. Okay, so I've sewn one side of the zipper tape to one side of the front. I want to make sure that this zipper goes up and down easily. I'm not going to undo it at the bottom. So now I want to pin the other side of my fabric, clip it, and I want to make sure that the edges of each side are even with each other. Okay, so I've got those all clipped together, and I'm going to separate the zipper to make it easier to stitch this onto my garment. Okay, since I'm stitching on the other side, I want to stitch from the top down. I'm going to move my needle all the way over to the other side of the zipper foot and stitch on this side. And I'm going to stitch kind of close, probably about the middle of the seam allowance, to avoid the teeth getting caught in the fabric. Here we go. I think this shifted a little bit. Let's see if they match up. Okay, I've stitched both sides of my separating zipper to the front pieces. I'm going to zip it up and see how well they match. One side is a little bit lower than the other, so I'm going to take one side out and do it again. Okay, let's try this again. I unpicked the side that was not sewn in and just stitched it again, moving it to the correct position, exactly the same way I did before. And now, let's see if they match up. Perfect. Match up at the top, the bottom. Yeah. Okay, so now we're ready to move on and stitch the outer pieces together at the shoulder seams and then the lining. Okay, for the time being, I'm going to leave my front pieces zipped together, the back and the front shoulder seams together, and stitch them with my regular sewing machine using the walking foot. And I like to stitch from the center to the side seam. So I'm going to turn this over. There's one. Now here's the other. Okay, now I'm going to stitch the lining together at the shoulder seams, and I'm going to do that on my serger. Okay, for stitching my collar piece to the neckline of my main fabric, I'm going to put in, first I'm going to open the zipper. And I'm going to stitch a line of stay stitching around the neck edge so that I can clip the curves and fit that collar on there easier. So I'm just going to make it about 3/8 of an inch, maybe between 3/8 and 1/2 an inch. And I'm going to use my big scissors, these, and just cut a couple snips into the stay stitching along the curved edge of the neckline. Now I'm going to take my collar, and I want the long edge of my collar. And this is my center back. I marked it here. I'm going to match it with the center back of my body piece. And I'm going to clip it. And my zipper tape extends over the edge of this seam here, this edge. I'm going to just trim that off. Okay, now I'm ready to sew. I want to make sure that I don't hit the zipper teeth. Go very carefully so that you don't, make sure you don't catch those zipper stop. Okay, now for the fun part. It's a little bit hard to see the entire, this is my outer fabric that I have stitched together at the shoulder seams and the collar. This is the front, and I've unzipped it, and here's my collar, and then we have the back. So now I'm going to stitch the right side of the lining to the right side of my vest, and I'm going to use the burrito method. I'm going to stitch around the arm side and then the front, all the way around the collar, and then this front, and then this other arm side, and then we'll turn it inside out. We'll start with the front section, and I want to make sure that my zipper teeth and my zipper tape is, my zipper teeth are facing the inside, and my zipper tape is what I'm clipping my lining to. I'm going to clip it all the way around, and wherever things don't match up, I'm going to just ease it into place. I'm going to just match up my collar here. The seams match where the collar and the neckline are stitched together. I'm going to sew all the way from the bottom of the zipper tape and up the collar and around the collar and down the other side, and then I will sew the arm side here and here, and then we'll turn it inside out. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to start with the arm side since those are the two shorter bits, and then I will go do the rest. And I'm going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to stitch the front around the zipper and the collar and back down the other side of the front. Okay, I'm going to have to put my zipper foot on because the zipper teeth are here and I cannot stitch close enough to it with my walking foot. Okay, I put my zipper foot on and now I'm going to stitch about a 1/2 inch from the edge of the fabric. Okay, rather than stitch all the way around using my zipper foot, I'm going to stop here and stitch my other zipper tape so that I can use my walking foot on the rest of around the collar and the arm side. Okay, I'm getting close down to the bottom where the zipper head is, so I'm going to stop and push that on up so that I can sew down the rest of the tape with that out of the way. Okay, and before I go on, I'm just going to check and see how close I am to the zipper tape, to the zipper head. Not too bad. Let's see how the other side is. Okay. Not too bad. I just want to make sure that my lining doesn't get caught in the zipper when I zip it up and down. All right, so I'm going to switch back to my walking foot and sew around the collar and the arm side, and then we'll turn it inside out. Okay, now I'm ready to stitch around the collar. Okay, that's the collar. I'm going to do the other arm side just like I did the other one. So you really don't need to see that. And then I'll turn it inside out. Okay, we're almost in the home stretch. I stitched the lining to the outer fabric, around the zipper, up around the collar, back down the other side of the zipper, and then the two arm side. And I did turn it inside out just to double check and see how everything looked before I trimmed the seams. And it looked okay, so now I can go ahead and trim the seams. And I'm not going to do a lot of trimming because I'm afraid I don't want anything to fray. This, I don't know if the fur will fray. I've got it serged pretty well, but I know that the lining will. So I'm clipping the corners of my collar. And I'll do a few little clips on the arm side where it's curved. And I'm going to turn it inside out. So we'll start with one side. Just reach in from the back. And now it's starting to look like a vest. Okay. So the next step now, you stitch the side seams together, and what you need to do for that is open it up, separate the two, and put the underarm seam together, and we're going to stitch the underarm seam from one end to the other. So I'm going to pin it right here where the lining and the outer fabric meet. There's my pockets. Clip these together, and hopefully your pockets match up. If they don't, you can cut them off. Okay, so I'm getting ready to stitch the side seams. Use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, got to do the other side now. We'll do the exact same way. Okay, sewed my side seam in the lining from here, and then in the outer fabric and around my pocket. And on both sides, you can turn it inside out now. Actually, it kind of turns itself. And now we have a vest. And I'm just going to check and make sure the zipper works. Perfect. Now all we have to do is the hem, and we're going to do something called bagging the lining. And they do this for coats all the time, and basically what we're going to do is kind of turn our coat inside out again, and we're going to stitch the lining to the outer fabric from one side to the other, from one zipper tape to the other zipper. And we're going to leave about a 4-inch opening, and then we'll turn it inside out and stitch it closed. Leave an opening in the middle of the back to turn it through about 4 inches, 4 or 5 inches. Okay, we are almost finished. See, I only have like a 1/4 of an inch where the little tongue goes into the zipper. So I'm going to use my zipper foot and stitch as close to that as possible. Oh, that came out kind of uneven. Okay, let's turn it inside out and see how it looks. Here's my opening. Be a little, just slips right through. Look at that. Okay, so here it is. All finished. I'm not crazy about these pockets. They're too far on the side. I think I might take those out and just stitch up the seams. But zips up. Collar's nice. Yeah, those pockets have to go. But I like it. Feels really soft. Okay, that's it. That is the Oakley vest with a zipper in the collar and the lining. And I will see you next time. Please leave a comment below if you have any questions. And I really appreciate you sewing along with me, and hope you will join me again. Thanks. Bye-bye. Go sew beautiful.